The twin suns of New Haven cast long shadows across the mining platforms when the first ships appeared. Colony Administrator Yuna Kim was reviewing the morning shift reports when her assistant Jin Ho burst through her office door, his face pale. With terror. "Administrator, you need to see this immediately," he gasped, pointing toward the massive viewport that dominated the colony's command center. Yuna followed his gaze and felt her blood turn to ice. Dozens of sleek obsidian vessels hung in the sky like predatory birds, their hulls reflecting no light from the distant stars. Each ship stretched nearly a kilometer in length, bristling with weapon ports that glowed with an ominous purple energy. The Voidspawn had found them. "How many?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer would be devastating. 63 capital ships, ma'am. Long-range sensors detect at least 200 smaller attack craft." Communications Officer Day. Hyun's voice cracked as he delivered the report. "They're maintaining position just outside our orbital defense grid." Yuna's mind raced through their pathetic defensive capabilities. New Haven possessed only 12 automated defense satellites, designed to ward off pirates and asteroid collisions, not a full-scale Voidspawn invasion. The colony's security force consisted of 30 guards armed with basic plasma rifles, adequate for maintaining order among miners, but useless against the galaxy's most feared predators. The Voidspawn had earned their reputation through 3 decades of systematic destruction. They consumed entire worlds, stripping them of all organic matter before moving on to their next target. Unlike other hostile species, they showed no interest in negotiation, conquest, or resources. They simply devoured everything living and left barren rocks in their wake. "I get me a priority channel to the Galactic Defense Council," Yuna ordered, her hands trembling as she activated the colony's emergency broadcast system. The sophisticated equipment hummed to life, its quantum transmitters preparing to send her. Desperate plea across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized to show the familiar seal of the Galactic Council. After several long moments, a bureaucratic aide appeared on screen, his expression one of mild annoyance at being disturbed. "This is New Haven Colony requesting immediate military assistance," Yuna began, trying to keep her voice steady. "The Voidspawn have found us. We have 40,000 civilians and minimal defenses. Our shields won't hold for more than 6 hours once they begin their attack." The aide consulted his datapad with infuriating calm. "Colony designation NH7742, correct? I see your request has been logged. The Defense Committee will review your case during next week's session." "Next week?" Yuna's composure cracked. "We'll all be dead by then. Please, you have to understand—" "I'm sorry, Administrator Kim, but proper protocols must be followed. New Haven's strategic value doesn't justify deploying our limited fleet resources. I suggest you implement standard evacuation procedures." The transmission ended, leaving Yuna staring at the blank screen in disbelief. Around her, the command center staff exchanged horrified glances. Everyone knew there were no evacuation ships, capable of removing 40,000 people, and even if there were, the Voidspawn would never allow them to escape. Outside, the enemy fleet began to move. The massive ships descended through New Haven's atmosphere with predatory grace, their hulls generating electromagnetic fields that made the colony's buildings vibrate ominously. Warning sirens wailed across the settlement as families rushed. Toward the reinforced underground bunkers, Chief Engineer So Young appeared at Yuna's side, sweat beading on her forehead. "The shield generators are running at maximum capacity, but they're designed for asteroid impacts, not sustained bombardment. Once those ships open fire, we have maybe 4 hours before total collapse." Through the viewport, Yuna could see the Voidspawn vessels taking positions around the colony. Their weapons began charging, purple energy crackling along the length of their hulls like captured lightning. Smaller attack craft swarmed around the capital ships, their movements coordinated, with insectile precision. "Try the Altarian fleet," Yuna ordered desperately, "and the Centauri Defense Force. Someone has to respond." For the next hour, they transmitted plea after plea across the galactic communication networks. The responses were always the same: strategic considerations, resource limitations, political complications. The major powers of the galaxy had weighed New Haven's value and found it lacking. As the first energy blasts began hammering their shields, Yuna made one final transmission. She opened a broad-spectrum channel that would reach every inhabited system within 50 light-years, her voice carrying across the void to anyone willing to listen. "This is Colony Administrator Una Kim of New Haven. If anyone receives this message, please know that we tried to be good neighbors. We mined our ore, paid our taxes, and never caused trouble for anyone. The Void Spawn are about to destroy us, and the galaxy has chosen to look away." Her voice broke as explosions rocked the colony above. "If someone out there has the courage to act when others won't, please remember that we existed. Remember that 40,000 innocent people lived and worked here, and that we deserved better than to die alone." The transmission ended as the first Void Spawn breach pods pierced their outer perimeter. Captain June Park was sipping his morning coffee in the command chair of the UES Thunder when the transmission came through. The Earth vessel cruised silently through the outer rim, its sleek hull cutting through the darkness between distant stars. This patrol route was usually quiet, perfect for breaking in new crew members and testing upgraded systems. Lieutenant Hannah Lee sat at the communications console, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she monitored dozens of galactic frequencies. The young officer had joined the crew only 3 months ago, fresh from Earth's Naval Academy, and still possessed the idealism that veteran spacers often lost after years among the stars. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal," Hannah called out, her voice tight with concern. "It's on the emergency frequency, Priority Alpha." June set down his coffee and leaned forward. Priority Alpha meant imminent threat to civilian lives. "Put it through the main speakers." The bridge filled with the desperate voice of Colony Administrator Una Kim, her words crackling through subspace static. As the message played, June watched his crew's expressions change from routine attention to growing horror. When the transmission ended with that final heartbreaking plea for someone to remember them, the bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. "That's from New Haven Colony," Hannah said quietly, checking her database. "It's a Catharian mining settlement about 3 days from our current position. According to the records, the Galactic Council refused their request for military assistance yesterday." Navigation Officer Kai Wu pulled up the tactical display, showing their current position relative to the doomed colony. "Sir, we're the closest ship to their location. The next nearest vessel is a Centauri cargo hauler, but they're not equipped for combat." June studied the holographic map, his jaw tightening as he processed the information. The Thunder was a relatively new design, one of Earth's first deep space cruisers built specifically for long-range operations. She carried advanced shields, railgun batteries, and a complement of 200 Marines. But going up against a Void Spawn fleet was essentially suicide. "What do we know about Void Spawn tactics?" he asked his tactical officer, Ensign Young Min. The young man's face paled as he accessed the military database. "They're unlike anything else in the galaxy, sir. Pure predators. They strip worlds of all organic matter, then move on. No negotiations, no prisoners, no survivors. Intelligence estimates suggest they've consumed over 40 worlds in the past 3 decades. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Yun Su stepped forward from her station. "Captain, I've treated refugees from Void Spawn attacks. The psychological trauma is unlike anything I've seen. These creatures don't just kill, they harvest. Every person on that colony will suffer unimaginably if no one intervenes." June felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like lead armor. Earth had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago, and humanity was still considered a minor power by most species. The Thunder and her sister ships represented Earth's attempt to prove they belonged among the stars, but taking on the Void Spawn alone would likely mean the destruction of his entire crew. "Sir," Hannah spoke up from her console, "I'm monitoring Galactic Defense Force communications. They're not sending anyone. The official response is that New Haven lacks strategic importance." The captain's hands clenched into fists. He'd spent 20 years in Earth's military, fighting pirates and protecting trade routes. But this was different. 40,000 innocent civilians were about to die horribly while the galaxy's major powers debated the cost-benefit analysis of saving them. "Sergeant Tay 1 to the bridge," June commanded through the ship's intercom system. Within minutes, the Thunder's Marine commander appeared in the bridge's main hatch. Tae-won was a compact, weathered man who'd served in conflicts across 3 star systems. His uniform bore the scars of countless battles, and his eyes held the steady confidence of someone who'd faced impossible odds before. "You heard the transmission?" June asked. "Yes, sir. My Marines are already discussing it in the mess hall. They're not happy about the Council's decision." June stood and walked to the main viewport, staring out at the star field beyond. Somewhere in that darkness, families huddled in underground bunkers while death descended from above. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his daughter, who'd just started school, his wife who worried every time he left on patrol. "How fast can your people prep for a combat drop against Void Spawn?" he asked without turning around. Tae-won's grin was audible in his voice. "For those bug bastards? Give me 2 hours, Captain. My Marines have been itching for a real fight." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone understood what the captain was considering, and everyone knew it violated direct orders from Earth Command. The Thunder was supposed to avoid major engagements until reinforcements arrived, but reinforcements were weeks away. "Sir," Hana said softly, "Earth Command specifically ordered us to avoid confrontation with Void Spawn forces. If we disobey, then—" "We'll face the consequences," June replied, turning back to face his crew. "But I'd rather face a court-martial than live knowing we abandoned 40,000 people to die." He walked to his command chair and activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is Captain Park. We've received a distress call from New Haven Colony. They're under attack by Voidspawn forces, and the Galactic Council has refused to intervene. We're changing course to provide assistance." The captain paused, letting his words sink in throughout the ship. "I won't order anyone to participate in what might be a suicide mission. Any crew member who objects can transfer to escape pods and await pickup by the next patrol ship. No questions asked, no marks on your record." He waited for several long minutes, but no one moved toward the escape pod bays. Instead, he heard the sound of Marines checking weapons and engineering crews, pushing the engines beyond safe parameters. "Set course for New Haven Colony, maximum burn," June ordered, "and signal the crew to prepare for combat operations." The Thunder's engines roared to life and the ship leaped toward hyperspace. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what it meant to answer a call for help. The Thunder burst from hyperspace like an avenging comet, her hull glowing from the violent transition between dimensions. Captain June Park gripped his command chair as the ship's inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for their emergency drop from faster-than-light travel. Through the main viewport, New Haven spread before them like a vision from hell. The colony's last shield generator erupted in a massive fireball that painted the sky orange and red. Without that final barrier, the void spawn poured across the settlement's surface like a living tide of destruction. Their sleek, insectoid forms scuttled between buildings with horrifying speed, their razor-sharp limbs tearing through metal and concrete as if it were paper. "Mother of God," whispered Navigation Officer Kai Wu, his face pale as he watched the carnage below. "There must be 10,000 of them down there." The void spawn moved with terrifying coordination, their chitinous bodies gleaming purple-black in the light of the burning colony. Each creature stood roughly human height, but possessed 4 arms ending in blade-like appendages, and their elongated skulls housed compound eyes that missed nothing. They flowed around obstacles like water, but water that cut and killed everything in its path. "Sir, I'm detecting life signs in the underground bunkers," reported Tactical Officer Young Min, his sensors cutting through the smoke and chaos. "But the void spawn are already breaching the outer tunnels. The civilians have maybe 30 minutes before those things reach them." In the Marine Bay, 3 decks below, Sergeant Tae-won strode between the drop pods where his warriors made final preparations. The compact Korean veteran had seen action on 6 different worlds, but nothing quite like this. His Marines, men and women from every corner of Earth, checked weapons and armor with the methodical precision of professional soldiers who knew they might not survive the next hour. "Listen up, devils." Tae-won's voice echoed through the bay, using the nickname Earth's Marines had earned during the Proxima Rebellion. "Those bug bastards have been having a party down there for 18 hours. Time to crash it. Corporal Min-Soo sealed his helmet and performed one final check of his assault rifle. The weapon was a masterpiece of human engineering, firing electromagnetically, accelerated projectiles at hypersonic velocities. Beside him, Private Soo-jin packed her demolition kit with improvised explosives made from mining charges they'd scrounged from the ship's industrial supplies. "Remember," Taewon continued, his scarred face visible through his helmet's faceplate, "we're not just fighting for Earth today. There are 40,000 people down there who've been waiting for someone, anyone, to give a damn about their lives. We're going to show them what humans do when the chips are down." The drop pods were cramped, coffin-like affairs barely large enough for one Marine and their equipment. Each pod contained enough life support for 30 minutes and basic retro rockets for course correction during atmospheric entry. They were designed for rapid deployment behind enemy lines, not full-scale assaults against overwhelming odds. "Pod bay doors opening," announced the ship's computer in its emotionless synthetic voice. Below them, New Haven's burning surface rushed up to meet the incoming Marines. Corporal Min-Soo felt his stomach lurch as his pod separated from the thunder and began its fiery descent through the colony's atmosphere. The pod's hull grew red-hot from atmospheric friction, and the entire craft shook violently as it encountered air turbulence and anti-aircraft fire from void-spawn ground forces. Through his pod's small viewport, he could see the other Marines, falling alongside him like a meteor shower of human determination. Each pod left a brilliant trail of superheated plasma as it plummeted toward the surface at terminal velocity. 30 seconds to impact. Taewon's voice crackled through the comm system. "Remember your training, watch your sectors, and keep those civilians alive." Min-Soo's pod slammed into the colony's main plaza with devastating force. The impact crater, sending void-spawn warriors flying in all directions. Before the dust had settled, he triggered the pod's emergency release and rolled out with his rifle. Already firing, 3 void-spawn had survived the impact and were closing on his position with inhuman speed. His first burst caught the lead creature center mass, the hypervelocity rounds punching through its chitinous armor and dropping it in, a spray of purple ichor. The second alien leaped over its fallen comrade, its 4 razor-tipped arms reaching for Min-Soo's throat. He rolled sideways and put 2 rounds through its compound eyes, watching it collapse in a twitching heap. The third void spawn came from above, having scaled a nearby building with spider-like agility. Min-Soo barely had time to raise his rifle before Private Soo-jin's explosive charge detonated against the creature's back, sending pieces of alien anatomy flying across the plaza. "Nice save," Min-Soo called out, but Soo-jin was already moving toward a group of wounded Catharian civilians who had been caught in the open when the shields fell. The cat-like aliens huddled behind an overturned cargo transport, 3 of them bleeding from claw marks. Across the colony, similar scenes played out as 200 human Marines crashed into the void-spawn swarm like hammers striking glass. Each impact point became a small island of fierce resistance as Earth's warriors formed defensive perimeters and began the desperate work of saving lives. "Form up on me," Sergeant Taewon's voice boomed across the battlefield as his combat shotgun roared, each blast scattering void-spawn chitin like deadly confetti. "Establish fire lanes and start moving these civilians to the bunkers. We're not leaving anyone behind." The battle for New Haven had begun, and for the first time in 18 hours, the void-spawn advance had been stopped cold. Deep beneath New Haven's burning surface, Engineer Bo Ram crawled through maintenance tunnels barely wide enough for his shoulders. Sparks flew from damaged power conduits above his head, while the sounds of battle echoed through the metal walls like thunder. His engineering uniform was torn and stained with hydraulic fluid, but his hands remained steady as he worked to save 40,000 lives. Colony Administrator Yoona Kim lay propped against a tunnel wall, her orange fur matted with blood from a deep gash across her forehead. Despite her injuries, she held a technical manual in her trembling hands, reading specifications aloud to the human engineer who had appeared like a miracle in their darkest hour. "The plasma mining cutters operate at 15,000 degrees, she wheezed, her cat-like ears twitching at each explosion from above. "If you can reroute the plasma flow through the ventilation shafts, the heat alone should fry every bug that tries to come down here," Bo Ram finished, his fingers dancing across a maze of control circuits. The young Korean had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was likely suicide, but seeing the hope in Yuna's golden eyes gave him strength to continue. The mining equipment was massive, designed to slice through solid rock with streams of contained, stellar fire. Bo-Ram had worked with similar systems during his service on the asteroid mining stations near Earth, but never under combat conditions. One mistake would flood the tunnels with superheated plasma and kill everyone they were trying to save. Above ground, the battle raged with desperate intensity. Sergeant Tae-won crouched behind the twisted remains of a cargo hauler, his tactical display showing the positions of his remaining Marines scattered across the colony. What had started as 200 warriors was now down to barely 60 effective. "Fighters! Alpha Squad, report!" he barked into his helmet comm, ducking as void-spawn plasma bolts sizzled overhead. "Corporal Hyun-woo here, Sergeant. We've secured the school complex, but we're taking heavy casualties. These things just keep coming." Through his helmet's heads-up display, Tae-won could see Hyun-woo's squad pinned down near the colony's educational center. The young corporal and his 5 remaining Marines were protecting nearly 300 Catharian children who had been trapped when the attack began. "Nari, I need you to provide covering fire for Hyun-woo's extraction," Tae-won commanded, spotting Private Nari's position on a rooftop 2 blocks away. Nari Kim adjusted her heavy plasma cannon, a weapon that had been designed for anti-vehicle combat but worked devastatingly well against void-spawn swarms. The recoil from each shot threatened to knock her off the building, but she held her position with grim determination. "Roger that, Sergeant. Targeting the hive cluster in Sector 7 now." The void-spawn had been busy during their 18-hour occupation of New Haven. They'd constructed several breeding structures throughout the colony, organic towers that pulsed with purple bioluminescence and spawned new warriors every few minutes. These hive clusters were the key to their tactical advantage, allowing them to replace losses faster than the defenders could inflict casualties. Nari's heavy weapon roared, sending a stream of coherent energy into the nearest breeding structure. The alien construction writhed and shrieked as it burned, its death cry echoing across the battlefield like nails on metal. Dozens of newly spawned void spawn collapsed as their life support was severed. "Now Hyun-woo, move those kids." Corporal Hyun-woo sprinted from cover with his assault rifle blazing, cutting down 2 void spawn that had been advancing on the school. Behind him, his Marines formed a protective corridor as 300 terrified Catharian children ran toward the tunnel entrances. "Come on, little ones," shouted Private Jun-ho, scooping up a wounded kitten-like child who had stumbled. "We're getting you to safety." But the void spawn were adapting to human tactics faster than anyone had expected. A new wave of warriors emerged from the shadows, these ones larger and more heavily armored than the first assault troops. Their chitin gleamed with an oily sheen that seemed to absorb energy weapon fire, and their movements showed an intelligence that made Tae-won's blood run cold. "Contact! New variant void spawn, heavily armored." Hyun-woo's voice was tight with strain as his rifle fire bounced harmlessly off the approaching creatures. Down in the tunnels, Bo-Ram heard the desperation in the radio chatter filtering through his helmet comm. His modifications were almost complete, but the void spawn were learning to breach the underground defenses. He could hear their chittering calls echoing through distant maintenance shafts. "How much longer?" Yuna asked, her voice growing weaker as shock set in from her injuries. 30 seconds, Bo-Ram replied, sweat dripping onto the delicate control circuits. "But I need you to activate the emergency ventilation system when I give the signal. Can you do that?" Yuna nodded weakly and dragged herself to the environmental control panel. Her clawed fingers hovered over the activation switch, waiting for the human engineer's command. On the surface, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The new void spawn variants were pushing through the marine defensive lines with terrifying efficiency. Corporal Hyun-woo's squad had been forced back to the tunnel entrance, but there were still civilians scattered throughout the colony. "All units, this is Tae-won. Fall back to the secondary perimeter. We can't hold the outer districts." But even as he gave the order, the sergeant knew they were running out of options. The void spawn had superior numbers. They were adapting to human weapons, and reinforcements were still days away. That's when Bo-Ram's voice crackled through the comm system with 3 words that changed everything. "Plasma system online. The underground tunnels erupted with superheated death. Streams of stellar fire burst from every ventilation shaft, emergency exit, and maintenance tunnel across the colony. The temperature in the underground areas instantly rose to levels that would vaporize organic matter, but the human marines had already evacuated to safe positions. The void spawn caught in the tunnels simply ceased to exist, reduced to component atoms by temperatures found in the hearts of stars. Those on the surface found their escape routes cut off, as every underground passage became a river of liquid fire. For the first time since the invasion began, the void spawn advance ground to a halt. But victory had come at a terrible price, and the battle was far from over. The last void spawn warrior fell with a wet thud against the burned remains of New Haven's central plaza, its purple ichor staining the cracked concrete. Sergeant Tae-won lowered his smoking shotgun and surveyed the battlefield that had consumed the last 6 hours of his life. The silence that followed felt unnatural after the constant noise of combat. No more chittering alien calls, no more screaming plasma bolts, no more explosions that shook the ground beneath their feet. The Korean Marine limped through the smoking ruins, his left leg dragging from where a void spawn claw had found its mark. Around him, the remnants of his force moved like ghosts through the devastation. Of the 200 Marines who had fallen from the sky in their drop pods, only 63 remained standing. Too many good soldiers had paid the ultimate price, to save people they'd never met. Private Na-ri sat slumped against her heavy weapon, the plasma cannon finally silent after hours of continuous fire. Her face was streaked with sweat and soot, but her eyes still burned with the fierce determination that had kept her fighting when ammunition ran low and the odds seemed impossible. "How many?" she asked quietly as Tae-won approached. 137, he replied, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "But they didn't die for nothing. 40,000 civilians are breathing because of what we did here." In the distance, Engineer Bo-ram emerged from a tunnel entrance, supporting Colony Administrator Yoona Kim as she took her first steps on the surface in over a day. The Kitharian's amber eyes were wide with disbelief as she surveyed the carnage that had been her peaceful mining colony. Her orange fur was matted with blood and dust, but she was alive. They all were alive. Yoona looked up at the human sergeant, her cat-like features showing an emotion that transcended species barriers. "You came," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling of dying fires, "when the entire galaxy turned its back on us, when even our own people said we weren't worth saving. You came." Tae-won knelt beside the wounded administrator, his weathered face softening. "Ma'am, there's something you need to understand about humans. We don't do the math on who's worth saving. 40,000 lives in danger? That's all we needed." "To here." As if summoned by his words, Captain June's voice crackled through the comm system from the thunder in orbit above. "Ground team, this is actual. I'm getting priority transmissions from Earth Fleet Command. Seems word got out about our little unauthorized mission." Tae-won grimaced, knowing that disobeying direct orders would likely end his career. But looking at the grateful faces of the Kitharian survivors emerging from their bunkers, he found he didn't care about the consequences. "What's the word, Captain?" he replied into his helmet comm. "Well, Sergeant, the good news is we're not facing court-martials. The bad news is that every major news network in the galaxy is broadcasting footage of our battle. Earth's been fielding calls from species I've never heard of, all wanting to know more about these crazy humans who fight for strangers." Around the colony, more survivors began appearing from hidden shelters and reinforced basements. Kitharian. Families clutched each other tightly, their large eyes reflecting the orange glow of distant fires. Children who had spent nearly 24 hours in underground darkness finally saw sunlight again, though it was filtered through smoke and ash. Corporal Min-soo helped an elderly Kitharian male to his feet, the old alien's whiskers twitching with emotion. "Thank you," the colonist said in accented Standard Galactic. "My granddaughter, she's only 5 years old. Without you—" "Don't mention it, sir," Min-soo replied, steadying the old alien. "Just doing our job." But it wasn't just a job, and everyone present knew it. The human Marines had risked everything for people they'd never met, defying orders and facing certain death because it was the right thing to do. Word of their sacrifice was already spreading across the galactic communication networks at Light. Speed. Captain June's voice returned to the comm channel with excitement that he couldn't quite hide. Taewon, you need to see what's happening up here. I've got ships dropping out of hyperspace every few minutes. Altarian medical frigates, Centauri supply vessels, even a hegemony battle cruiser offering escort services. Half the galaxy wants to help with the rescue effort now. Yuna Kim looked up at the human sergeant with wonder in her golden eyes. But why? Yesterday no one would even take our calls. Taewon smiled grimly as he watched his exhausted Marines sharing their rations with hungry colonists. Because yesterday they could pretend that ignoring suffering was acceptable. Today they watched humans prove that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Private Sujin approached carrying a small Kitharian child who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. The kitten-like alien had been separated from her parents during the chaos, but now she purred softly in the human marine's arms, instinctively trusting the warrior who had saved her life. The galaxy's watching us, Taewon continued, his voice carrying across the battlefield. They want to see what kind of species fights not for territory or resources, but for the simple principle that innocent lives matter. Today, they got their answer. As rescue ships began appearing in New Haven's sky like metallic angels, representatives from dozens of worlds arrived to assist with relief efforts. The same species that had refused to help during the crisis now competed to offer aid in the aftermath, suddenly eager to associate themselves with Earth's reputation for selfless heroism. But the humans who had fought and died on New Haven's surface weren't interested in glory or recognition. They helped load wounded colonists onto medical transports, distributed food and water to survivors, and began the grim task of recovering their fallen comrades. Ground team to Thunder, Tae. One finally replied to his captain. Mission accomplished, sir. The civilians are safe and we're preparing for casualty evacuation. As the twin suns of New Haven set behind the smoke-filled horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, one thing had become clear to the entire galaxy. Earth's warriors didn't fight for glory, profit, or political advantage. They fought because it was right, and that made all the difference. The Kitharians would never forget the day Earth's Marines fell from the sky to save them, but more importantly, neither would the galaxy. The end.